Okay, so the first order of business on this video is I have to, of course, plug the upcoming Boston Antiquarian Book Fair, where I'll be, which is November 7th to November 11th. So right after the election. So, of course, perfect timing for everybody to come there. And it's going to be at the Heinz Convention Center in Boston. So I hope everyone will come. Well, maybe not everyone, because, of course, we're on YouTube, and we don't want to exceed the maximum occupancy of the Heinz Convention Center there. Although I think the firemen give special exception to wealthy people, so don't worry about that. But at least some of you should come and visit me at the upcoming fair. So, and if you want to see the catalog of books that I'm bringing to the fair, I'll put a link below in the information, so you can click on that. What I thought I would talk about in this video are manuscripts, handwritten books, instead of the printed text. Now, manuscripts are something all booksellers and collectors seem to be after these days, and I even myself envision myself as a sort of 19th century Robert Curzon in a romantic way. And he was a great manuscript hunter, and he would scour the Eastern Mediterranean and the Middle East for treasures and ancient manuscripts, many of which ended up in the British Museum. So I'm very interested in manuscript material, and it's very exciting when you find it. Now, why are collectors and booksellers so interested in manuscript material? I would say, first of all, there's a certain intimacy. When you're holding in your hands something actually written by somebody, you really feel connected to that person. The second thing is there is always the opportunity for discovery with a unique work, whether it's the writer or the reader or even the community that helped create the manuscript. There are often insights you can learn. And the third, I think, if I have to be a little more Freudian in my psychoanalysis, is probably the ego and the exclusivity of holding in your hands something unique. And I often imagine, there's a collector in his privy chamber, and he's holding this secret knowledge, this unique book of which nobody else has a copy. And you hear in the background, a sort of evil, cartoonish cackle of whether he should share, the secret knowledge with the rest of the world or not. I think even for booksellers, we have the added benefit of when you have a unique manuscript, you have fewer comparables. If you have a printed book, you have to compare it to other printed books on the market. It's almost like, the schoolboy taunt, whose Chaucer is better, mine or yours? And when you have a unique book, like I said, you have more pricing flexibility. So the way the market has developed, there are a lot of people after manuscripts. Now, manuscripts fall into, I would say, two major categories. And I'll try and show you one of each in this video. Text manuscripts, which by their very name, of course, have more to do with the text itself. And illuminated or illustrated manuscripts, which of course are more focused on the illuminations, whether they're miniatures or various decorative elements in the manuscripts. And each of these two categories have, of course, subcategories. In text manuscripts, you might find scientific manuscripts, you may find literary manuscripts, you may find private diaries, like of a 15th century nun who's questioning her vows of celibacy. Though I don't know if that's a subcategory. And of course, in illuminated manuscripts, you have books of hours and various liturgical books. And then, of course, these categories are not hard and fast rules. You have ones that bridge, like bestiaries, which are medieval books of animals, where the text is equally important to the wonderful illustrations. So it runs the full gamut. So as I said, I'm going to show you one of each. And do we start with the text manuscript or the illuminated manuscript? Well, I will take out my hat here and I'll place in a little paper for text and illuminate it, and I'll shuffle it up so it's completely randomized, don't worry. And we're going to start, it says here, with the illuminated manuscript. So I have in my hand here a box. Everybody gets excited by a box. And on the side of the box is an old inscription that says 1460, or when the manuscript was presumably made, to 1915, when the box was presumably made. And I'm going to open it up here. It's got a little contraption. And inside is a splendidly bound book here, magnificently bound. I have to very gingerly take this out here and place down the box. Who doesn't love a box? Even better, this is going to be a box in a box. But first, let's talk about the box here. And it says Ore on the spine here, which is indicating it's a book of hours. And just look at that craftsmanship. This was bound by Sengorsky and Sutcliffe, one of the preeminent, venerable English binders. And this was really done at the height of the Edwardian revival of medieval craftsmanship. And you can see all the medieval styles here with the knotwork, and they've added various beautiful jewels to the binding. And on the back here, we have a Christogram for the name of Jesus Christ. So I'm going to very carefully open up this splendid box to reveal what's inside. And inside is a tiny little book. And I have to take that out. Now this is going to be a miniature prayer book. So I'm going to place this box down for a second. Now, a miniature bibliographically is considered to be any book less than 3 inches. Now, in, I think, 25-something years of book selling or more, I've only had ever one miniature book of hours or prayer book besides this. So they're very uncommon on the market, unlike the larger, more elaborate, and rather expensive peers, books of hours, etc. And when we open up this charming little book here, we see little miniature paintings from the 15th century, and it goes through various scenes of the cycle of the Passion, whether it's the crucifixion, the deposition, the lamentation, or of course my favorite, the betrayal. Who doesn't love the betrayal? And what's wonderful besides these miniature paintings of the period is at the beginning of the work here, we have a hint of why this book was made. And this also goes into, I would say, what I talked about before, that you can make discoveries about manuscripts. So we have here a little inscription at the top in Latin and an emblem of sort. And it says in Latin at the top that a small gift, when given, makes a poor man your friend. So this is an indication of why this miniature book of hours was obviously a presentation of a small, inexpensive book, but that makes it rather rare and curious today. Now, we don't know to whom it was given, unfortunately, yet at least, and we don't know the patron who gave it. But like I say, if you analyze the manuscript very carefully, and it has a red crescent in the cross there, we may be able to discover who the patron was, and that would be very exciting, of course. So that is something very intriguing. And the other thing is, if you look at the box, it's also a mystery of who would spend all of this money on this box in 1917 or something. And we don't have a clue yet on that, but this was an expensive undertaking during the period. But we may be able to consult old bookseller catalogs or old auction records and learn how this rather splendid miniature book descended in the family and actually who created this wonderful box for it. So that's an example of rather unusual illuminated book. And again, this goes both to, the discovery element, like I said, but also, for this particular one, that exclusivity element, because this is really like holding a jewel and studying it. So you can imagine that collectors would be very interested and excited by a small miniature prayer book like this. Now I'll go on to discuss a text manuscript that I'm bringing to the Boston Fair. It's, I think, number 18 in the catalog if you want to take a closer look at it. Now, this is actually one of the more exciting manuscripts I think I've discovered in the past years, so I'm very happy about it. And the reason it's so exciting is it is a collection of a large number of very unusual and rare humanistic texts of the 15th century, at least certain excerpts of them. And what's particularly wonderful about it is we know who wrote it, who the scribe was. And that scribe was Antonio Travasegni. He was an Italian humanist, and he came from a very prominent family of scholars. Now, he might have lived a little bit in the shadow of his older brother, Guglielmo Travasegni, who was a very famous scholar. And actually, his legacy is that William Caxton, the first English printer, printed one of his brother's works. And there's even some speculation, although I don't know how substantiated that is, that William Caxton may have actually printed one of Antonio Travasegni's works. And what's truly remarkable about this book is that not only has he signed it, but he signed it in many places where he was and the date of when he wrote it out. And he seems to have written it between 1440 and 1453. And he travels from Savonia in the west, in the Ligurian trading post of Italy, all the way out east. He goes to Galata, which is today in Istanbul, but then in the 1450s was the Italian trading post directly opposite Constantinople. And what really thrills me about this manuscript is in 1453, just before the fall of Constantinople, he flees with the Ligurian community there back to Savona. And can you imagine that? One of the most important historical events he was an eyewitness to. We're talking about the fall of Constantinople. This is the end of the Byzantine Empire. This is the last vestiges of the Roman Empire falling. This is the event that really formed the collective Christian consciousness in Europe against, of course, the Turks. And, of course, I would say, most importantly, it was the inspiration for the songs by They Might Be Giants. Istanbul was once Constantinople. So that's an important fact there. And as I say, it's a wonderful collection of humanist texts, and I can't go over all of them, but you can consult the catalog, but I'll give you a taste of what it contains. And the first one that I'm looking at in here is a very famous text by Henricus Septimalensis, and it's on the variety of human fortune and the consolation of philosophy. Now, there's a very famous work with a similar title, The Consolation of Philosophy by Boetius, and this is a parallel work slightly later, since this was written originally in the 12th century and Boetius's work was earlier. But both of these works were very important in medieval Christian thought because they explored a lot of classical sources, but they brought them over, they bridged into the medieval Christian tradition, and they really explored the vicissitudes and fortune of human life from a philosophical standpoint. And this particular text on fortune was very influential in the early Renaissance and the medieval period in the world of education. And even Dante himself studied the text of the variety of fortune closely, and you can see its influence on some of his works, like the Vita Nova, that explores, of course, his love for Beatrice. From an autobiographical and philosophical standpoint, it had influence there. And you can understand a man like Antonio Travasegni focusing on a work like this. He's witnessing practically the fall of Constantinople and traveling back, and he's examining in his life through all these travels, like I say, the vicissitudes of human fortune. So a very unusual text here. And it contains some other wonderful texts, excerpts of Ovid and things like that, that really allow us to explore his life and his reasons for these travels, traversing, just like it says in his name practically, from Savona to Galata, back and forth. So it really also adds to his I would say, the oeuvre of his work, because there are other works that are known by him, and this really allows us to piece together a more clear biographical analysis of his life. So a very unusual and exciting text. And, a text like this, like I say, going back again to the value of discovery in text manuscripts, really could be, into and of itself, a PhD thesis right there on the lost manuscript of Antonio Travasegni. It could take years to study a manuscript like this and pull out all of the details from it. So I'd conclude just looking at this by pointing out just a couple things which I love as well about the manuscript, again crossing over a little bit into the decorative elements. And those are the manicules he drew in the book, little hands to point out various notes. And they're so magnificently drawn, these hands, in the 15th century there. And one more little thing I love is a little historiated initial here, if you can see. And if you zoom in very closely, I believe it's a phoenix, which probably represents at least, biting its wings. In medieval iconography, the crucifixion, I believe. So a wonderful historiated initial that they snuck in there. So this is a truly remarkable 15th century textual manuscript, which hopefully will be at the Boston Fair. Certainly it's in the catalog, unless it sells before the fair. So come and see it, come and say hi. And I would love for everyone to visit and, check out some of the wonderful books at the fair there. So again, please tune in next time, and don't forget to subscribe to this Rare Book channel.